I am the director for the Institute for Community and Economic Engagement at UNCG. I'm a professor in the Department of Peace and Conflict Studies, and I've been here at UNCG since 2008. And so my area of scholarship, as well as professional work, is understanding how to recruit, retain, and reward faculty who are community engaged scholars at UNCG and other institutions. And so my goal for today is to really help you understand what is community engaged scholarship and how is it seated within a spectrum of areas of work. And so I come to this work as a scholar, as an administrator. I also work with the Carnegie Foundation. I've served on the National Advisory Committee since 2014 and continue to serve in roles around the classification. And so this is an area of work that is ongoing and current. So you are getting the latest and greatest. A few years ago, I spoke with Karen Fisher for this interview or for this article where she was wanting to explore the idea for the Chronicle of Higher Education. Why is it that universities that are doing such incredible public impact work are not able to really do the work that they want to do in the fullest way possible, and why aren't we making advances institutionally? And so she was really looking at like the conclusion of her study was, hey, it's really the faculty who are getting in our own way in terms of not recognizing community engaged scholarship for its full potential, its full impact. And so this is really at odds with our institution's needs nationally, internationally, to be able to say that universities are a good value, a good public value for our students, but also for our citizens. And so when I talked to her, one of the very first question that she asked me was, this may sound dumb, but can you describe what is community engagement and how is that different from other forms of public impact research? And so this is something I've been studying since my very first paper I ever wrote was explicating the term public scholarship. I was at Penn State, and that was the term that they were using. And then they also had a service learning office. And so for over 25 years, folks have been really trying to figure out what are these different terms that we are all using, and what's the commonality and what's the difference. And so these images on this slide show some of the words that are most common that people will use synonymously or with great distinction, but it's not always clear what they mean. So UNCG revised its promotion and tenure guidelines at the university level in 2010. In 2011, we spent a lot of time talking about definitions and what does this mean. And so that first image here is our document, and this this slide deck will be sent to you, and these are hot linked. So this is when we really created a policy document that was going to help us, not policy document, a provost document that was going to help us interpret policy. So we had revised university guidelines to recognize community engaged teaching, research, and service as three distinct areas and contributions of faculty work at the university level. We also knew that we had to move it into the unit level as well as the department level. And so this is one of the earliest standards that has been used by our campus, but I also hear from lots of other folks across the nation that they've been using this as well. A few years ago, Lynn Blanchard and Andy Furco at UNC Chapel Hill and University of Minnesota, respectively, also wrote about their institutions and how they were working to define community engaged scholarship on their campus. And then the University of Michigan has also created its own documents supporting people interpreting this, particularly as it relates to promotion and tenure and reward, because we want to be really clear that there is a difference. So as I shared in 2010 to 2012, there was a movement at UNCG to move from the university policy into the schools and college and then the departments. And so the provost said that the departments must all align with the units and the units must align with the university policy. However, the caveat is that each unit and department can shape it in the way that makes sense for them. And so that's in part why we do have different flavors of community engaged scholarship and terms across our campus. Even though we have, as a school, decided that the Carnegie classification definition is the term or the definition that we'll use, and also community engagement's the term that we primarily use. And so these are also linked. And so you can see where we've had these. And again, this has been something that folks have been using on our campus as well as nationally. So a handful of years ago, I worked with one of the founders of the Carnegie classification for community engagement and a couple of grad students, and we examined all of the policies. So we had a proliferation of policies as well as a proliferation of ways that our definitions and terms were used. So at this bottom level, the university document had used community engaged research and creative activities, community engaged teaching, community engaged service as 3 topic areas. And then it used additional words to sort of describe it, right? And so these were the terms, and then these were some of the words describing it. The supportive document that I shared had basically worked to further articulate what these terms mean. Because in the university document, there are no definitions per se, but there are some, terms and descriptions. As we look through the colleges and universities, some of them adopted the university document language, some of them adopted the definitions document, and some of them created their own, like a broker for implementing change through scholarship, right? Or engaged citizens. When we get to the department level, there's even a greater proliferation of different terms. And so they have a couple of papers that talk about what this all means, but the slide I think is important because we do use lots of different terms, even on our campus, and that's okay. And so part of what we wanted to understand through this study was if we said that we had integrated community engaged support for community engaged scholarship into our policies, did we do that? Did we actually do it in a way that it's showing the difference and really honoring a community engaged scholarship? And so I'm kind of backing into that definition right now. So knowing that we were using the community engagement definition from the Carnegie Foundation, we knew that we were talking about mutually beneficial and reciprocal partnerships. So community engagement, the way that we are using it on our campus, is the collaboration among institutions of higher education and their larger communities for the mutually beneficial exchange of knowledge and resources in a context of partnership and reciprocity. And so key to this is really understanding, okay, so if we have a range of ways in which we're engaging with the communities to, for, with, on them, how do we know if we're doing community engagement work or like applied research, all these other kinds of things. And so what we came up with was basically there's 3 characteristics of all public impact research. All kinds of research or scholarship that is intended to make a difference on an external community outside of academic peers, right? So all public impact research, regardless of whether it's community engaged or not, share in common that they all talk about outputs, and that these outputs are about the activities and the artifacts or the products that are developed as a result, right? So when I'm talking about, or when people are talking about public impact research, whether it's public scholarship, community engaged research, other public intellectual work, they're often talking about an expression that can be shared, can be critiqued, can be built upon. And we also know that in public impact research, it's not just the traditional forms of knowledge, but it's also things like data sets, curricula, activities, exhibits, performances. We also know that in our current climate, we have not only AI, but we also have open access interests. So there's this idea that NSF, NIH, others want to accelerate access to the public to our research data. So this helped us get a COVID vaccine sooner than we would have if we hadn't had open access. That's just like one of the favorite ones people like to pull out. But this is a way of really, so there are folks who are trying to understand what is getting in the way. And so UNCG was at these meetings at DC over the last few years. And the reason why we were invited was because we're a community engaged institution, and they wanted to have a sense of what is it going to take to reward faculty so that faculty are willing to participate in open scholarship? At Simon Fraser University, there's the ScholComm Lab, and so they have some really great resources and research that's also continuing to look at open access, as well as public impact research and what's getting in the way in terms of faculty rewards and recognition. So in common, all public impact research shares not only outputs that are diverse, but they are also intentionally, purposefully aimed at achieving a contribution to a population or a social issue, a community, right? They're purpose-driven, they're value-driven, they're intended to make a difference. And not just a difference in our academic community, but really also in that community level. So when we look at impact or mutual benefit, that was one of those key terms in the definition from Carnegie. There's this sense of bidirectional impact, or two forms. It's not only our scholarly impact that we're very well versed in. We all get that loud and clear in our doctoral work, right? Or our Masters of Fine Arts, right? We're all looking at how are we impacting our own disciplinary community. In all public impact research, it's also a metric to look at, have we made a difference to the community or the issue or the professionals that we're intending to affect? And so this idea has been around again for quite a long time. And so in this publication that was looking at research universities and civic engagement, there was a sense of, in our work, in our body of scholarship, so in your dossier, if you're looking at a community engaged scholar, there may be some of the products or activities that they are doing that may have high scholarly impact and low community impact. They're writing a peer-reviewed journal article, they're doing something that is really for the scholarly community, trying to contribute to that knowledge base, right? Move the field forward. But if it's also community engaged dossier, you will also very likely see artifacts that may be low scholarly impact in terms of addressing the academic community and have high community impact, because the community partner and also the aims of the scholarship is looking to have a direct benefit to them. And so that may look like, for some, it may be, for some faculty, we've had them publish in professional publications that go out to the 10,000 or the 100,000 teachers in a region or a state, right? And so there's this way of, how do I increase the exposure of my work and also increase the utility or usefulness of the community partners that I'm working with to be able to shape their work in the future or their communities. And so it could be policy. Over the course of a community engaged scholar's trajectory, they're typically trying to, through the full body of work, do both high scholarly impact and make a high direct community impact. And so that is often where they are. But as a scholar, they really are choosing where they want to be on this, and they are negotiating that for lots of different reasons and ways, because of who their community partners are, what things are looking like in terms of funding, and whether they are able to do some of the things in the community still, or if they kind of have to pivot towards doing some of those scholarly impact things because they aren't able to do that. So there's been some shifts in terms of COVID. We've seen a number of folks kind of go in either direction. Some were able to go into high community impact, where others really were isolated and not able to do that work anymore. So they leaned more towards writing or pivoting towards a different kind of scholarship altogether. So I just like to point this out, that our chancellor was part of this report when he was at UCLA and was the associate vice chancellor. And he was actually the one to write their community engaged classification application for Carnegie. So this is something that has been really useful. So the third thing is the distinguishing, differentiating feature of community engagement as distinct from other forms of public impact research. And so I sort of have a big reveal, right? Technology, so you can kind of guess what it is. And it's really the relationships, right? Or the process in which we're doing the work. And so if folks ask me, how do I know if something's community engaged? And they'll like give me a product to review, like there'll be a a paper, right? Or an exhibit or a film. And I'll say, I don't know, I need more words. I need a narrative to tell me what it is that this, who the community partners were and how they were included as thought partners and co-laborers throughout it. And so this is the piece where in that definition, they talked about reciprocity as being distinct from mutual benefit. This is where I'm really getting a sense of what was the level of engagement of those community partners in the scholarship start to finish. And so if someone is wanting their work or a particular piece of their work to be reviewed for community engagement, they're going to have to use a lot of words. And they're also going to need to talk about 2 levels of impact and their why. So the cone of engagement, oh, this is a little funky on the slide, but the cone of engagement is really a way of explicating or describing what reciprocity looks like. So just like in the bidirectional ways of looking at mutual benefit, reciprocity is also dynamic. And so there may be moments when a faculty member may be working with a community partner and it's early on in their relationship, and they might be doing things for each other or giving things to each other. They may be sitting in on an advisory committee, right, and giving some feedback to that school or that nonprofit or that entrepreneur, right? And so you're starting to get to know each other, and that's relationally appropriate because you're building trust. You're getting to know each other. You're developing communication norms. How often do we need to talk? What do you like to be included in? Can we talk early on in this process? And so you are in those levels, the reciprocity or the level of which your thought partner and co-laborer is kind of low. It's more a unilateral, unidirectional relationship. It's thin. But in the context of community engagement, there may be some projects or some partners where you have a really thick reciprocal relationship in which you're like, yep, that's my like other brain, right? Like we are working together with this. And so this might look like an advisory board that involves the population that's being served or addressed in the research. It may look like a collaborator who is working with you as a co-author, a co-PI, someone who may be recruiting funding with. And so in the cone of engagement, when we're evaluating faculty for their engaged scholarship, we are often listening for or hearing how they're collaborating with others. And if not for that other group, they could not have done this work. Without the time invested in developing the relationship, the trust, the partnership, they could not have access to doing the work that they're doing, to having the insights that they're getting, or being able to even know what kinds of products and artifacts they ought to be providing and delivering so they can have the highest impact possible. So, so at the end of it, there are those 3 metrics, right? There's 3, qualities of public impact research. And really, it's that third one that I should say 3 qualities of community engagement. And it's that relationship or reciprocity that makes it community engaged. And so this is a key value. It's a key understanding. And it's that sense, again, that like we both know some things. Neither of us knows everything. Working together, we will both know more and we'll both learn more about how to know. And so this is a epistemological argument, how we know what we know. As well as for some, it's about justice, it's about equity, it's about fairness, right? If you're going to be trying to solve our problems, maybe you should ask us what our problems are in the first place. And I think this is a common desire across all people. And so in this way, reciprocity is not just about relationships, but it's also about how we integrate the partners and that we value as a community, as a university, as a reviewer of dossiers, the experiential knowledge, the community wisdom, in some cases, indigenous knowledge systems that we're working with, and that we are looking at diverse forms of knowledge production. So diverse artifacts, activities, and that go beyond traditional measures. So when we're reviewing for impact, it is appropriate and helpful if it is community engaged for that faculty member to talk about the process, because the process itself is the independent variable that drives the ability to even have the result, the article, the impact, right? So without that process, we would not have it. So we actually are valuing and saying, this is a contribution. The process itself, the relationship, the trust itself is valuable. And so it is appropriate for us to know about this. We will find narratives and descriptions of community engagement and other forms of public impact research in all different domains. And so this is brought forward from the University of Michigan, when they're trying to show that this is in entrepreneurship. This is certainly in like technical assistance work. It's in consulting. It's in performances and installations. It's in government and advocacy. It's in our courses, right? There's community engaged teaching. And so this isn't something that just looks one way in one field, but there are many, many domains in which we can develop these relationships and this epistemic inclusion. So at UNCG, we also know that community engaged scholars, as is true for most scholars, but especially for community engaged scholars, the research shows that they are integrating community engagement often across roles of teaching, research, and service throughout their trajectories. So hard sciences, folks tend to come into this through the teaching role, and then start to establish relationships with partners and then get into in the scholarship. For others, they get into the scholarship and then later on figure out ways to bring in undergrads or graduate students, right? And so again, when you're looking at this work, you'll often see that there's a level of like efficiency, right, that people are looking for to be able to integrate their partnerships, their research into each other so that they are actually building these threads of research that are interconnected, but are yet still distinct with regards to who their partners are, if they have partners, or the methodology they're using. And this is something that community engagement's a long-term commitment. So faculty are often flexing roles and their levels of engagement over time. So there is no shame in someone or any or shame or like negative review that needs to be made if there is there's a period of time where that faculty member has a lighter touch or engagement with communities, and that may show up in their narratives. And then also we also know that it's helpful to understand that there may be different levels of connection to community. And this is something that we've been developing the last few years at UNCG, is around clarifying, especially around teaching, but this could work for research as well, is that it's there's community focused work where the focus of the topic is on the community. So reciprocity, very thin. Community placed, the students or the work is happening in community, but we still have somewhat of a like mid-level reciprocity of engagement, right? Mid-level withness. And then community engaged is that like that most thick level of reciprocity and that we're really truly engaged. So again, this is all acceptable. We're not only recognizing and rewarding the most engaged, but we are understanding that if you're doing that third highest, deepest level, you're going to need a lot more words, and you're going to be creating artifacts that are for communities as well as for academics. And so at this point, people are like, all right, well, how do I even evaluate this? Because it just seems like if you have really good intentions and you do something nice for other people, that you get to be rewarded. And that, you know, is that rigor? And so that is one of the key questions that people have. And so there's the sense often that if we treat everybody the same and we have the same metrics for everybody, that's fair. And we now know that that's not fair, that's not equitable, because if we are trying to do different kinds of work, then we're going to need different tools, we're going to need different systems, and we're going to have different kinds of outputs. So Glassick, Huber, and Mayeroff did a comprehensive review. This is like now 30 years ago, looking at, what is scholarship? And they looked across all the different disciplines. So looking from professions to humanities to applied to basic research. And they said, okay, this is what we came up with. If we are trying to understand if something is quality scholarly work, we can identify that this scholar in their dossier had clear goals. They had a clear intention of what they were trying to do. It may be a lit review, but they have preparation and mastery of existing knowledge. So this is often like a lit review or a knowledge review, where you're saying, I'm aware of the body of work out there, right? And this is how I'm contributing. This is how I'm filling a gap. This is how I'm fitting in. That scholar or scholarly work is also describing why this is the best method for the thing I'm trying to do. So for community engaged scholars, they're often saying, I can't know what I want to know or access what I need to access if I'm not in collaboration, if I don't have the trust, if I'm not working with community partners. And so that becomes very clear that then you understand why that's true, that preparation is going to show why this is such a clear and important benefit for this method. When they are writing or reporting about the results of the so what, significance is going to be bidirectional. It'll be about academic impact and how I know I've made a difference to my academic institution, as to my students, and how I've made a difference to my academic community. But it's also going to be how I know I made a difference to my diverse audiences. They will have effective dissemination and communication. So all scholarly work, even if when it's performances, right? You are going out, there's a moment where people can come and they can critique, review, build on my work because I put it out there in a way that was effectively communicated, disseminated. And so community work is also that same, that we're looking at, is this appropriate for the audiences that we are intending? And then is it ethical? So are we appropriately citing others? Are we following guidelines? That's true for regular traditional work, but also when we're looking at ethical conduct in community engagement, we're not doing a one and done and leaving many communities, because the work of the trust building and the relationship is something that we are doing not only for our own research, but when we violate the trust and we say, oh, thanks for this, and now we're gone, and we know you still don't have all the resources you need to address the issue, and the community feels like they've been abandoned or exploited, that not only harms us, but it harms our institution, it harms future research, it harms those communities that are now feeling estranged from an institution that is in their backyard or that is in their nation and that they deserve to have access to. So ethical conduct is also about showing up and having that relationship and being clear about when the relationship needs to transition. And so this information is in one of our volumes, we call it volume 4. And so that's also something we will share with you. So when I talk to faculty about writing their narratives, I'm sharing with this group. So there's a separate webinar that I'll do that is for faculty who are writing their dossiers. But I want you to see what I'm sharing with them with regards to helping them sort of think through, as a scholar, help the reviewers understand what is your agenda. And so that agenda, often as a community engaged scholar, is about transforming the relations. It's about transforming a community or contributing to the transformation of a community. It's not that you're able to do it, you're not playing God, but that you are leveraging your resources, your knowledge, your expertise to be in alignment with and partnership as a thought partner to that community, as a co-laborer to that community. And so this is just an example of one that I created. It's just a fictional person. But in this one, they said, okay, in one sentence, if I had to tell somebody like why I do what I do, it's because I want to transform the relationship of families in high schools. So families and students experience a sense of belonging. And so this is someone who's doing educational research. And so this is really helpful for them. And so I said, name 2 or 3 threads if we're going to create a tapestry to help the reviewers understand what you're doing. Name 2 or 3 threads that sort of say, like, here are the lanes that I'm following, right, of the work that I'm doing. And so in this particular instance, the person is using participatory action research and case study method. They're working with a school and they're collaborating with a principal and guidance counselors, as well as teachers and parents. And they also are collaborating with their class. They have undergraduate students who are enrolled in an independent study, and they also have summer research. As they talk about or look about their audiences for impact, they know that they want to make a difference at that school and with those folks, but also their students, and then also the principal, the leadership, scholars, so people who are studying. This is their disciplinary impact. So you actually see how it starts to get more dimensional, multidimensional, than I'm going to write an article. And so when they look at their goals, right, the why or the outcomes, they are very clear about this is about increasing efficacy, right, or student learning, or increasing or developing a scholarly record in an area that is understudied. And then again, that helps inform what are those artifacts or products that are going to be created. And so this can be really helpful to do at the start of a study when you're working with a collaborator. But sometimes some of these things are very emergent, and that's exciting and totally natural and how it is. So I have this reminder that community engaged scholars may also use other methods other than community engagement, which have different outputs, outcomes, and processes. So for example, this person may be also, I'm going to look at thread 3, be doing policy analysis and document analysis. And so they're really looking at the effects of local and state policy on student and family engagement. And so they're looking at some primary data sources that they're able to get. They're able to do that at home in the middle of the night by themselves, and their collaborators or other scholars. So that may be one of the threads that's actually informing their community engagement. And so again, the artifacts and the threads may look different. So we know that community engaged work is really important because we know that for community engaged teaching, that this is going to affect student learning outcomes that we care a lot about, student learning and development outcomes. And so these are ones that I think we've seen over and over again, but there's been 20, 25 years and meta reviews that have been able to show that when we are teaching in a community engaged way, that we're involving students in learning with communities and about communities, that we are improving learning, retention, positive mindsets, career readiness, and career-related skills. We also know that there's a second report here that's a primer, also around belonging, wellness, and connection to cultural communities. That's one of our QEPs. We know from research, or not research, surveys at UNCG that there's an I Belong survey that students took, and 3/4 of the students who said that they took service learning courses or courses that had community engagement connected to it, 3/4 of them said it helps me feel a stronger sense of connection to my university, to UNCG. 3/4 said it helps me see the relevance of what I am learning in my courses to real world issues and communities. 3/4 said it allowed me the opportunity to give back to my cultural community, and 3/4 showed me the ways that I can make a positive difference in communities or society more broadly. So faculty are choosing to teach in a community engaged way, are also supporting many of our goals for our institution. All right, I'm about to get to the question and answers, but I want to also share with you that there's a lot of information on our website. So communityengagement.uncg.edu, if you go there, This is overseen by the Institute for Community and Economic Engagement. We do everything that we possibly can to share everything we're learning, whether it's research or whether it's our definitions. And so this is where you can go and find some of the documents that are helpful here. I want to share a little bit about the national context of a couple summers ago, the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine funded a 2-day workshop that was looking at what will it take to build institutional capacity for engaged research. And so a lot of it was about what are the institutional structures, but also faculty incentives. And so this is an important place that we have the publication. We know that this is important. We know that in the Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, and this model is being used in a lot of places. I added the heart here, but the idea of belonging and civic muscle, this idea of connection and accountability is part of what is going to hold together and make possible the outcomes that we care about. So this is really like the process and the product go hand in hand. We can't disconfigure this. This is the heart of it. We know that nonprofits and foundations that are funding this work are continuing to be committed to this. So I'm working with colleagues to talk, and with Pew funding, to talk more about how can we help funders understand how to make strategic investments in universities so that we can do public impact research and community engaged research. And then this is American Public of Land Grant Universities. They have an error table database that is looking at, is very, very comprehensive review to understand how can we incentivize, recognize, and promote publicly engaged scholarship. And again, the idea of we really need to be reforming appointment, retention, tenure, and promotion practices. And this is where UNCG is like ahead of the game. And we are recruiting community engaged scholars, and we're keeping them in ways that others can't because we're able to give them fair and equitable reviews. And so this slide is just a reminder of these are the 3 areas. You can say it's OOP, output, outcome, process, if you can't remember. And that reciprocity is really the core of it. And so at this point, I'm going to just share real quickly that there is a online, so this is at communityengagement.uncg.edu. You can find much of what I was talking about in this slide anytime you want with other folks. And so this will really help you, I think, if you need to have a conversation in your committees. We're ordering more paper copies of this, so we'll make that available. But there is this online resource that could be brought up if it would be helpful for the ongoing conversations that you're having where folks aren't able to come together to do this. And then online, there is also the narrative threads for faculty, helping them to tell their story. And so this is something that I've worked with many of you on. And so this is the narrative components and helping them sort of think through their big picture, their threads, their impact audience, and walk this through to help make it more accessible and visible for reviewers. All right, with that, we can stop recording and I will take any questions.